David Letterman dropped his cue card. Paul Schaefer stopped mid-court. The audience froze. In 33 years of hosting, he had never done what he was about to do next. A letter sat on his desk, handwritten, 9 sentences long, from a boy named Mike. It asked for something impossible, something Letterman couldn't give. But what happened in the next 3 minutes would shatter every rule of late-night television. The phone call that followed would break him completely. And what happened 3 weeks later would haunt him forever. This is the story of the night David Letterman stopped being a host and became a witness to something sick. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like it. It was a Thursday night in October 1987. Studio 6A at Rockefeller Center was alive with energy. The red curtain glowed under tungsten light. Paul Schaefer and the world's most dangerous band were locked in tight. The audience was warm, caffeinated, ready. David Letterman walked out in a charcoal gray suit, gap-toothed grin flashing under the light. His hair was still brown then, a little wild, a little Midwest innocent. He waved. The applause was deafened. Thank you very much, he said, settling behind the desk. Folks, we've got a great show tonight. Really, I mean it this time. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Paul hit a rim shot. Dave grinned. Everything was clockwork. The monologue rolled. Jokes about rape, jokes about the weather, jokes about New York cab driver. The audience ate it up. Paul threw in his signature high-pitched laugh at just the right moment. Doc Severinsen would have been proud. But halfway through a bit about coffee price, Dave paused. His hand drifted to the edge of his desk, almost lazily at first, the way it sometimes did when he was buying himself half a second before the next joke. The wood under his fingertips was familiar, worn smooth by years of fingertip, pencil, coffee mug, blue cards sliding back and but this time, instead of finding the usual stack of note cards or the rim of his coffee mug, his fingers brushed against something thin and slightly rough paper. He glanced down. There, half tucked under a stack of blue cards, was a small white envelope. It looked out of place, like it had wandered onto the set by accident. It was folded twice, the creases uneven. The handwriting across the front was crooked and forceful, the letters pressed into the paper, as if whoever wrote them had gripped the pen too tight. To Mr. Letterman, please read tonight. It's important. Michael Thompson, age 9. Dave's smile faltered. Not dramatic, not in a way an average viewer would notice, but enough that anyone who knew him well would have seen it. The easy, automatic late-night grin dimmed just a fraction, as if someone had turned the studio lights down by one click. Behind him, Paul Schaefer noticed immediately. Paul's finger, which had been resting on the keys and gently vamping between punchlines, froze midair. His head tilted just slightly, the way it did whenever he sensed something going off script. He watched as Dave's gaze lingered on the name written in that unsteady child scrawl. Out in the rows of Studio 6A, the audience kept laughing, the echo of the last joke still rolling around the room. They had no idea anything had changed. Dave picked up the envelope with both hands, almost too carefully, as though he were afraid it might fall apart. He slid a thumb under the flap and opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper, torn from the kind kids use at school. The edges were slightly jagged. There was a faint impression of where it had been ripped from a spiral notebook. He unfolded it. His eyes moved across the first line, then the second. On the third line, he stopped reading aloud. He just stopped. The entire atmosphere in the studio shifted, like a room realizing at the same time that something terrible or sacred had just entered it. The laughter died out in a strange, uneven way, some people trailing off mid-chuckle, others silenced without really knowing why. The hum of cameras and lights suddenly felt louder than it had a second before. Paul leaned forward slightly on his bench, eyes narrowed, trying to get a sense of what was happening. He could see Dave's face, and that was enough. Whatever was on that paper, it had gotten past the armor. Folks, Dave said softly. His voice was different. The usual cadence, quick, ironic, always one beat ahead of everyone else, was gone. What came out was low and unvarnished. I need to read you something. There was no joke, no setup, no wink to the camera, just a man holding a letter. What he read next would freeze the show in place. No bit, no transition, no comedy to cushion the land. Years later, Paul Schaefer would call it the most powerful 60 seconds I've ever seen in that studio. And the people in the audience that night, none of them knew they were about to watch David Letterman's heart crack open on national television. Dave cleared his throat. It wasn't the performative kind of clearing your throat. It was the kind you do when you're trying not to choke on something heavy. He lifted his eye and looked directly into the camera lens, not at the audience, not at Paul, not at the cue card, straight into the little glass circle that connected him to living rooms across the country. This letter came to us 2 days ago, he said quietly. It's from a boy named Michael Thompson. He's 9 years old. He lives in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. He unfolded the paper all the way now. It shook just a little. It says, he took a breath and began to read. Dear Mr. Letterman, my name is Mike. I am 9. My dad can't talk anymore because he had a stroke. He is in a wheelchair. The doctors say he won't get better. Dave's eyes flicked up for a brief second, then back down to the page. But every night at 11:30, I wheel him to the TV and we watch. He can't laugh out loud, but I can see his eyes smile. It's the only time he smiled. The room was very, very still now. Camera's words soft. Every breath in the studio felt measured and careful. Last week he stopped smiling, even when you're on. I think he's giving up. Dave's voice waved just enough for everyone to hear. Can you say something to him? Just so he knows someone him? He swallowed, eyes blurring for a heartbeat before he forced them back into focus. His name is Robert Thompson. He's 41. He used to be a firefighter. Please, Mr. Letterman. I don't want him to give up. Michael asked. When he finished, there was an absolute, almost eerie silence. Studio 6A. Not a cough. Not the rustle of someone shifting, and there's nothing. Even Paul had gone completely still. His mouth parted slightly. His hands had dropped from the key and now rested in his lap. For one of the only times in his career, he had no idea what to play. Dave set the letter down on the desk with great care, like something fragile. His jaw flexed. He blinked twice hard, as if trying to convince himself he was still on television and not alone with that letter in his office. Okay, he said, barely above a whisper. Okay. He turned his head toward Paul, his voice just loud enough to be picked up. Paul? Can we skip the next segment? Paul didn't even hesitate. Absolutely, Dave. Dave nodded once, then turned to face the audience. Then, again, to the camera. Folks, he said, I'm going to do something we don't do. We're not going to commercial. We're not doing it. I'm going to make a phone call. There was a ripple of uncertain laughter, then a murmur of confusion. The audience wasn't quite sure if this was a setup for something funny or not, but there was something in his tone that told them, this is real. Dave reached under his desk and pulled out the red rotary phone. The audience recognized immediately the same phone he'd used in 100 comedy sketches, the one he'd pretended to use to call the president or the control room or some imaginary guy in Jersey. Tonight, though, the way he held it made it clear this was not a prop. He set it on the desk and carefully dialed the number written on Michael's letter. Each turn of the dial seemed to echo in the room. The phone rang twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone picked up. Hello? A small, shaky voice answered. Hi, Dave said gently. The softness in his tone startled even. Is this Michael? There was a pause. You could almost hear the boy thinking on the other end. Yes, is this? Yeah, Michael. It's Dave. David Letterman. Dave's mouth twitched into a small, sad smile. I got your letter. The audience gasped. It wasn't planned. It wasn't prompted. It was the sound a room makes when it collectively realizes it is witnessing something real. What unfolded next would become the clip that outlived network contract and format change, and even the show itself, replayed in retrospective, shared late at night online, used by strangers to say, this is what it looks like when someone truly shows up. Paul Schaefer would later admit that he had tears in his eyes before the boy even spoke again. And David Letterman, the man who made a career out of never letting emotion get the last word, was about to break every one of his own rules. Michael's voice trembled through the tiny phone speaker, but the microphone picked up every nuance. You really called? I really called, buddy, Dave said, leaning forward like he could somehow get closer to Harrisburg just by bending toward the camera. Is your dad there? Yes, he's right here. He's in his chair. I'm holding the phone up. Dave nodded, even though the boy couldn't see him. Mr. Thompson? Dave said. Sir, can you hear me? There was silence on the line. Not empty silence, heavy silence. The silence of a man in a wheelchair, a little boy holding a phone, a wife somewhere nearby listening, a studio full of people sitting on the edge of their seat. Michael, Dave asked gently, is he listening? Yes, Mr. Letterman. He's listening. His eyes are open. Dave let out a slow breath and looked down at his desk for a heart, steadying himself. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted. It wasn't the voice of a host talking into a camera. It was the voice of one man talking to another. Mr. Thompson, he began. My name is Dave. I know you can't talk right now, and that's okay. You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know something. He paused, choosing each word as if it mattered, which it did. Your son Michael wrote to me, and I've got to tell you, sir, he is the bravest kid I have ever heard of. 9 years old, and he's taking care of you every single night, wheeling you to the TV, sitting with you, making sure you're not alone. His voice cracked a little on the word alone. That's not an accident, Mr. Thompson. Dave continued, that's you. That's what you did. You raised that kid. You raised a boy who doesn't quit. A boy who fights for his dad. A boy who loves you so much he wrote to some guy on TV just to bring your smile back. Paul now had both hands over his mouth. His shoulders shook. He didn't bother hiding the tears. The audience sat frozen. A few people had their hands clasped. Some pressed tissues to their face, but no one moved. It almost felt wrong to shift in their seat. And I want you to know something else, Dave said. When Michael wheels you to that TV every night, when you sit there together together. You're not just watching some dumb show with some guy in a suit. You're showing him what it means to keep going. You're teaching him that even when life knocks you flat, you can still show up. You can still be there." He swallowed hard. "So please, sir," his voice dropped even lower, "please don't give up. That boy needs you. And after reading his letter, I think the rest of us, we need people like you too in this world." Then, for a moment, there was nothing, just the hum of the light, the gentle ring of a piano key Paul had accidentally brushed and then let fade, the sound of 1,000 hearts beating in unison in a studio that had never been this quiet. And then, from the phone, came the smallest of sounds, a breath, a strain, the sound of someone climbing out of a deep well just long enough to reach the surface. "Thank you." The words were ragged and barely there, but they were words, real spoken words. Dave's face crumpled like a man who'd been holding his breath for too long. "Michael?" he asked, voice thick. "Did he just—" "Mr. Letterman," Michael whispered, his own voice breaking now. "He hasn't talked in 6 weeks. That's the first thing he said." The studio exploded, not into applause, but into something deeper and harder to name. People sobbed. People put their hands over their mouth. People turned and grabbed the hands of strangers. Dave covered his eyes briefly with one hand, trying to hold himself together. His other hand stayed on the phone. Paul rose from his bench and walked over, placing a supportive hand on Dave's shoulder. The gesture said everything that words could. Still holding the phone to his ear, Dave forced himself to breathe. "Michael," he said softly, "you tell your dad I'm going to call again next week, okay?" "Okay," the boy replied. "And you keep being brave. You hear me?" "I will." "Good." Dave let out a shaky chuckle that wasn't quite a laugh. "God bless you both." He hung up slowly, his hand lingering on the receiver as if letting go would make the connection vanish forever. The camera stayed on. No cutaway, no graphic, no music sting, just David Letterman sitting at his desk, trying not to fall apart. After a long moment, he looked up. "We'll be right back," he said hoarsely. The show went to commercial, but backstage, something shifted in him, something no one else could see, because this story, as powerful as it already was, still hadn't delivered its final blow. When they came back from commercial, there were no jokes, no clever return, no "Where were we?" self-referential bit. Dave sat at his desk, hands folded, and looked into the camera again. "Folks," he said, "I don't really know what we're supposed to do now. I don't have a bit prepared for this. I don't have a punchline." He smiled, a small, crooked, deeply human smile. "But I do want to say something." He picked up Michael's letter again and held it up. "This kid, Michael Tom, he did something tonight that most of us are terrified to do. He asked for help. He didn't pretend everything was fine. He didn't hide it. He said, 'My dad is hurting, and I can't fix it alone.'" Dave looked down for a moment, then back into the lens. "And I think that's the bravest thing in the world." Behind him, Paul started playing, a quiet, aching progression on the piano, the kind that made words feel heavy. "So if you're watching tonight," Dave continued, "and you're going through something hard, or you're sitting next to someone who is, don't wait. Don't assume they'll just be okay. Don't assume someone else will handle it." He leaned in a little. "Make the call. Write the letter. Say the thing you're scared to say, because you never know when one moment of courage might save someone's life, or their hope, or their voice." The audience was utterly, reverently silent. Dave set the letter down on the desk and exhaled. "That's all I got," he said quietly. "Thanks for watching. Good night." The credits began to roll, but the camera stayed. It stayed on Dave for a few extra beats. Paul kept playing, his music filling the space where jokes usually went. And for the first time in late-night history, the show ended not with laughter, but with silence. 3 weeks later, another letter arrived at the studio. The envelope was different this time, neatly addressed, in adult handwriting, not crooked, not shake. The return address read, Thompson, Harrisburg. Inside was a single page. It was short. "Dear Mr. Letterman, Robert passed away last night, peacefully at home, but I need you to know something. After your phone call, he started talking again, just a little, just enough. And 2 days before he died, he told Michael, 'I'm proud of you.' That was the last thing he ever said. Thank you for giving us that. Karen Thompson asterisk asked." Dave read it alone, at his desk. He didn't read it on air. He didn't turn it into a segment. He didn't tell the story again. He folded the letter, then again. Then he opened his desk drawer and slid it inside. It stayed there for the next 28 years. When he finally retired in 2015, a reporter sat across from him and asked the question every host eventually hears. "What's the most memorable moment from your time on television?" He could have talked about presidents, movie stars, musicians. He could have talked about ratings miles, historic interviews, the nights everyone in the building knew they'd nailed. Instead, he said, "A boy named Michael taught me that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just show up. Even if it's just your voice on a phone. Even if you don't have the answer, you show up." He paused. "I hope I showed up for him." Michael Thompson is 46 years old now. He lives in Pennsylvania. He's a paramedic. The boy who once pushed his father's wheelchair to the television every night grew up to be the man who runs towards sirens, who bends over strangers on sidewalks, who holds other people's fathers' hands in ambulance.